Another thing that's interesting to look at is the habitat features in the environment. And so here we got some really nice kind of layout, even though we have this artificial erosion and bank thing going on. But if you look upstream, you'll see a shallow area where the water's just skimming over the top. And that going away from it kind of upstream is a riffle. And riffles are where salmon spawn. They typically spawn on the back side of the riffle because that's the greatest aeration, water circulation area is back up there. As the river comes down, it then runs into like what's called a pool, because the pool's scoured out by this action of flow turning under, kind of helical flow. And the pool continues to go on until the next transition, which is right under the bridge, which is another riffle. The other thing that's really interesting here is you can see kind of an alcove area of this old abandoned channel. And you can see quieter water, you can see eddy currents, reverse currents, and a nice edge. So this is all pretty nice habitat on the other side of the river. This eroding bank and this rock is not really doing a lot habitat-wise. Hopefully it'll be reconfigured or will revegetate on its own. One thing I want to point out is there's been discussion that gravel mining affects spawning areas, and that's not true. The area that's mined for gravel is that high, dry area that's up above the vegetation. That's not a place where fish spawn. It might be a place where fish rest during a flood as they try to make their way upstream. In fact, gravel mining will help lower that surface and actually create areas where fish can rest, more areas than they have right now. Otherwise, the fish have to struggle in the main channel. Or if they're fortunate enough to have this off-channel habitat here, they can get some rest. But gravel mining is not mining in riffles. And the other aspect of that one might say is that, oh well, gravel mining affects spawning, would be to say that gravel mining is taking away a supply of gravel that supplies the riffles when the river moves sediment. And that's also been proved to be untrue, because we have so much material, and we've measured this, how much is in flow. There's plenty of bed load moving. It flows well below the elevation of where that's going to be mined. So in both cases, that's just simply not true. So we'll probably go into that bar 9 next, and then we're going to go upstream because there's another erosion site on the east bank called the Munsell property, which has been losing a lot of bank. We'll go take a look at that. It's really good to contrast that Munsell property is actually eroding mature riparian forest. It's those big trees you see in the background, big cottonwoods, and those are actually falling in. It's really interesting to contrast the habitat along the bank compared to a bare bank like this one, which really had no trees to fall in. So those trees, when they fall in, that's important kind of habitat. It's called large woody debris, and it provides cover and areas where fish can find cover and hide. And so those are probably the other areas we're going to go up to. And again, we'll look at spots and talk about the difference in elevation due to gravel bar aggradation or buildup. Again, this spot out here has come up like anywhere between 8 and 14 feet. And it hasn't even accounted for this year. Actually mining that one bar right there, leaving a buffer, a third of the upstream end, and then the side of the bar yields about 300,000 tons or 350,000 tons of gravel. So it just shows you just one, this is kind of a medium-sized bar compared to some other ones. The other proposal we have for this bar 9 is to actually excavate an alcove, something that looks like this thing, under the bridge. We'll show that site, and then we're going to go off-channel into like a 4-acre area and create a big off-channel habitat, which is now mostly a rundo. So there's a lot of habitat enhancement associated with that proposal, which hopefully will happen later this year, 2010. We're just upstream of bar 10 on the Munsell property. This is a place where there's been a lot of erosion in the last few years. And the last location we were is down there. You can barely see the Geyserville bridge with cars running across. And on the left is what's called bar 9. We were looking at that before. So anyway, what's interesting here, if you pan out this way, this is a very large bar. It's probably 2,000 feet long. This bar has moved about 300 to 400 feet eastward this way, and this bank has been eroding quite a bit. You can see there's a vineyard here, but there's also a house that's getting very close to the bank. And if you just swing around here a little bit, you can see these tall trees. We're going to look at more of this upstream, but this is the mature riparian forest. Got some cormorants in the top of that. These are the large trees that were generated before the river was channelized. So these things are probably 70, 80 years old. And we're losing this to the bank erosion. Now when it does that, it does make some nice habitat, but there's a lot of places where bank erosion occurs where there are no big trees. And that creates a big problem, such as this bank right here. So you have no root strength in this bank. It's eroding back and it's about to hit into the vineyard. So this is not a good situation. Now one of the things that we can do is we can skim the bar on the other side. If you took that bar down, you can see there's actually a really large willow tree in the middle there. See how mature that vegetation is. If we actually took that bar down, it would take a lot of the pressure off this bank. But this is also one of the problems that's going on out here, is that the river is meandering more, and we're losing this property in this mature riparian forest. So we're going to move upstream and take a closer look. Okay, so let's take a look at this eroding bank. If you take a look right down here, you can see that the trees that were here that just recently fell in, they had a rooting depth about halfway down the bank. And this is very fine, kind of a silty sand down here. Now if you look downstream, you also you can see recent retreat of the bank. We just had a flood that was about 26,000 CFS last week. And this is retreated, it looks to me to be about 10 to 15 feet, something like that, based on the roots sticking out. So the root strength of the strength of these banks is very low. It's just a silty material. Now if you look across at the bar that's built up, this point bar, if you look across this way, that's become very stable. You can see there's large trees, large willows and stuff forming on this bar that used to be the channel over there not very long ago, but that has built up to where the elevation of that bar is almost the same height as this bank. So one of the things that can happen here is that the river could be moving so much material, it might fill up and spill out the banks and go over into the vineyard land across, just cut across around the riverbed. And that's called an avulsion. And so the two problems that we have are lateral erosion, which we're seeing here a lot of, and avulsion. And one of the strategies is to take down these bars so that they're less high, less of an obstacle, so that when flood flow comes up, they can flow right down the middle. And that's what happened for a number of years until about 15 years ago when a lot of the mining ceased.